You're listening to the Synergy Leadership Podcast, a discussion with engaging, empowering, and enlightening leaders about the greatest competitive advantage in business and entrepreneurship that often goes unrecognized: a team's energy. Here's your host, the woman who puts the energy in synergy, Karen R. Jenkins.
Hello, and welcome to the Synergy Leadership Podcast, where we have an authentic conversation with leaders who inspire us to live, work, and lead with purpose. I'm your host, Karen R. Jenkins, and today I'm honored to have a great guest whose journey is a testament to resilience, to growth, and to the power of values in leadership. Major General Daryl Hood, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. We're really, truly excited to hear your story, not just the titles and the positions that others may know you by, but we're going to talk to the real Daryl Hood today. We want to go beyond the uniform and explore the personal side of your journey, the life lessons that you've learned, the values and the motivations that have basically shaped you both inside and outside of your professional world. So let's just get started. So I want to say I met you a year ago, and it was an honor, I must say, to meet you. Two-star general, commanding Fort Jackson. But I also got to see you and meet you on a personal level. And that's the person that I said, you know what, everybody sees and hears from you from the Major General, two-star general role, but I felt like there's a man behind that badge, right? There's a man behind those stripes. And we want to hear a little bit about you. So I'm just going to jump in and ask you to introduce yourself to our audience as, tell us who you are, Major General, but then after that, we're going to go beyond that and figure out who is Daryl Hood.
Okay, great. Good morning, good afternoon, whoever's receiving this podcast. Karen, let me just say up front, it is indeed a privilege and a pleasure to dialogue with you, whether it's in a professional setting where I'm representing the Army as a Major General, or as you alluded to, the personal side when we see each other outside that setting. Disclaimer up front. And so, yes, I'm a Major General in the United States Army, and I am assigned to Fort Jackson as the Army Training Center in Fort Jackson, Commanding General, the Senior Commander, and also the Deputy Commanding General for the Center of Initial Military Training. And so that there's some titles there, and anytime we serve for the pleasure of the people, obviously that's an official capacity. And so if there's something in our conversation today, I'll be very clear that is as such in my role in the Army, because there's law, regulation, policy, and I certainly will let you know if that's the case, or if I'm speaking my own opinion, my own accord, so that we can keep those separate and hopefully avoid any confusion. But you asked who I am. Born in the state of Texas, grew up primarily in the Southeast. My parents were from Georgia and North Carolina, and so I still to this day have family North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. And I grew up loving the Southeast with very disciplined parents that also in turn provided that foundation for myself, a younger brother, younger sister, two younger sisters actually. And there's a difference of 5 years separating us by age, myself and the brother 2 years younger, sister 3 years younger, and the youngest 5 years younger. And so honestly, our parents were growing up probably the lower end of middle income. My mother was a teacher. My father was in the Army, moved from active to the reserve component while he was a postal carrier, also the vice president for the U.S. Postal System, and did a number of odd jobs in the evening, just so that we could have what resources was required to allow us to at least have a platform for education, going to school, participating in sports, extracurricular activities. And so I'm very thankful, grateful for parents that really raised us the right way when we talk about values, instilling those in myself as well as my siblings. And then getting to the point in high school, hey, what do you want to do? And so playing sports in high school, predominantly football and track, knew that I would have some opportunities there. And at the time, I really wasn't focused on the junior ROTC Reserve Officer Training course. My focus was academics and playing sports and then trying to determine at that age what life would mean to me, some choices, looking at goals. And my father had a friend, and his friend and I had a really good relationship. And at times, I even think about my own kids today because my wife and I have 4 adult kids and 3 grandkids. It's interesting because sometimes growing up for myself, I wanted to show my parents, prove to them that um, their investment in me. We say train up a child in which the way you want them to grow and they won't depart for it. And that's primarily a foundation on a spiritual side. And so a little bit of rebellion along the way saying, well, hey, I know what I think I want to do. And my father was pretty smart, ingenuous, because if he'd have said, hey, you want to go in the Army, I probably would not have done it. I probably would have been doing, who knows, playing football or something else. But no, that's a little bit about myself. Again, married, 4 adult kids, 3 grandkids. My wife is phenomenal. She allows me to do what we've been doing. We celebrate 29 years on the 23rd of this month, and so I'm indebted to her, and just the fact that she's a woman of many talents, much like you. I don't know how you all do it sometimes, because I know your affiliation with your husband being retired and so forth. So I'll pause there, and hopefully that will allow us to continue our dialogue.
Yeah, so one thing you did share, and I didn't realize we had this in common. My mother was also a teacher, and my father was also military. So again, the connections and the similarities just continue to grow. So talk to us a little bit about, I want to know, as you've grown up, right? And you talked a little bit about your history. We'd love to hear about some of the defining moments or decisions that most shaped who you are as a person and a leader today.
Well, let's see. I'll start very early in life. I think I must have been around 8 years old. My father and again parents talked about responsibilities. It started chores, your bedroom, being able to handle multiple tasks. Hey, you're going to focus on your academics, but you also have to understand your responsibilities around the house. This is your bedroom. These are your things. You're responsible and need to be accountable. So I did that. My father taught me how to cut the grass with a push mower. So it was a chore. Hey, you cut our grass. And he says, hey, you're really doing such a good job. Why don't you see if maybe there are a few neighbors that might be willing for you to cut their yards. And again, this was, oh my goodness, this was in the 70s. And the work ethic perhaps might have been different then than it is now for someone that's 8, 9 years old. But needless to say, I did that. And my mother's mom and father were ministers, very active in the church. And so my mother was a preacher's kid. My father was a kid of parents that participated actively in church. And so it was, hey, whatever you earn, you're going to take 10% of that. And that's going to go for your tithe. And then you're going to take another 10%. That's for you to put towards savings of some sort. And then the other 80%, you want to buy these sneakers that everyone that Jordan was wearing and coming out with, then you put that towards it. And so that was probably the first defining at a young age of what responsibility was all about. That has really served me well to this day. That's rooted in me. I still have very much the same practice when it comes to looking at giving thanks from where my help and resources come from and how I go about investing in people and other resources. The next one I would say is enlisting in the Army first, serving from a private to sergeant and transitioning from active component to the reserve component. so that I could attend college. And I knew when my first assignment in the military was in Germany. I was in a field artillery unit. I spent a lot of time training in the field, and this was 1985, and we still had a national security focus on Russia and the Soviet Union. And I knew that I was not going to have an opportunity to really go to college while I was in that type of unit. And I said, okay, well, hey, what are your options? And it was I could continue to serve on active duty as an enlisted, and then over time see if I could obtain my degree. And once I knew there was an opportunity for me to switch over to the reserve side, do a simultaneous membership program and a contract while I was at the University of Georgia, that allowed me to do that. And I uh, I learned how to multitask, learned how to balance things, focus again on the academics as well as what was required financially to support myself, keep things moving. Then I got my commission finally in December of '91, and I've served every since then. So I'll stop right there and see if there's any follow-on questions you might have on that particular one or a different one.
Well, you talked about your realization of, okay, I know I want to go to college, and what is the best methodology for me to do that. So apparently education has been important in your life. So when you look at education and learning being such a critical component of your life, how has your commitment to lifelong learning? Because some people go to college or not. Some people go to high school, and then that's it for them. There's no more continuing to exercise that brain muscle. So talk to us. How has your commitment to lifelong learning influenced you personally? Excuse me. And how do you encourage others to keep growing?
Sure. Thanks for that question. I think what you're going to see is as we continue to dialogue throughout this podcast session, I really try to simplify things in life. Maybe it's just the fact that this old country boy from Georgia believes the more simple it is, the easier it is to follow. So it's my way of an equation, or I'll call it just my approach. So I usually ask myself three questions, and these three questions I apply to anyone that I'm talking to, whether it's a leadership role or simply just a question that you asked me. So that first question is, what what are my goals professionally and personally? The second question is, how do I or you define success? Because it means something different to each person. And then question three, what are your options in life? And understanding education opens doors, perhaps, uh, that someone who is less educated or not educated, we can go all the way back to the Civil War and look at segregation and slavery and see that a person that was lacking education, that could not read and write, was really behind in the terms of competition to those that were able to do that. And I believe that a person must continue to pursue education if you want to remain a change agent in life, for an organization, for yourself. If you want to be informed, then education plays a role in that. And whatever your goals are individually, or even in my case, there's certainly a professional side as well as a personal side. And because I do have a spouse throughout my military career, it's been one where you might hear people say work-life balance. I believe it's different. And the way I like to describe it or characterize it is it's really about trade-offs. Because one thing about serving in the military, um, each person, if you ask them, they all have a reason. They all have a testimony or their version of their story, why they wanted to serve. And I dare say the first response, is it going to be make the ultimate sacrifice? Um, there's motivation, there's things to inspire people, even if you look as recent as 9/11. But ideally, there are many goals and opportunities, things that you can do. And so lifelong learning requires you to stay committed and connected with education, or you will find out that you really are irrelevant and you tend to get left behind. I remember when I was my undergraduate degree at the University of Georgia, and then it would later follow my first master's in human resources. And there's a book out there and a story called "Who Moved My Cheese?" And it was two mice.
Yes.
Two mice. One was very forward thinking to say, hey, you know what? The quantity of cheese that we currently have is going to run out if we choose to do nothing. So it required personal courage. It required him saying, hey, I need to go out and try to find other cheese, do a reconnaissance that will enable me to continue to learn my environment. And then the counterpart, the other mouse, decided, well, hey, you go ahead. I'm fat and happy right here enjoying my cheese. And so the moral of that story was, as it played out, the one that chose to leave and learn the environment, to explore, to stay current and relevant with the situation, turned out to be very successful, just opposed to one that stayed and did not. So kind of a long way of talking about education, but I'll tell you, I think it's very important throughout one's life in our world today. And we see that as we look at even right here in our own society, domestically. And I think things are certainly changing a little bit. I think the vocational trades are coming back, whether it's a plumber, electrician, as opposed to saying, hey, I want to go get a 4-year degree. It goes back to goals. There's nothing wrong with either path. Each person he or she has to pick that path for them.
I love the fact that you brought up that book. I hadn't thought about it in a while. I actually required my kids to read it, I think, when they were in middle school, because it's a very small book, right? But it's so powerful. It carries so much weight. And one of the things, I had an opportunity to speak at the Women's Empowerment Symposium yesterday. And one of the things that we talked about, and I wanted to say, but I didn't have an opportunity, but I kind of got it across, was, there's nobody that ever grows in their comfort zone. So when you talk about the mouse that just kind of sat there and was like, dude, twiddling his thumbs. And sometimes people want to stay in their comfort zone because of fear, right? And I tell people, again, nobody ever grows in their comfort zone. And then the fear is, in my mind, false evidence appearing real. And I talk to people all the time. It's like, how many times have you had in your head, oh my gosh, this is going to happen. And what about this? And what about this? And then the thing occurs and it's nowhere near what your mind set it up to be, right? So you kind of, what I call wasted emotion. And if emotions were dollars, you just, delved out, $100 worth of fear and emotion for absolutely no reason. Talk a little bit about your efforts in leading people so that they're not in their comfort zone, right? They're not kind of falling victim to the fear part of it so that they can grow.
Cool. Resiliency. That has many components. I think when you stop and look at it, and again, this is me paraphrasing in my own words, I think you have to look at the physical, the mental, the spiritual, the emotional. There are other things, occupational, finances, other things that play a part of resiliency. So for me, a big part is the spiritual piece. My secret sauce, the success that I've had is because of my spiritual component, quite honestly. And so, sure, you mentioned fear. If my memory serves correctly, in the Bible, 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7, talks about God has not given me a spirit of fear, but of love, peace, and a sound mind. And so I really, focus on that. Is there sometimes a little bit of uncertainty? Perhaps there may be a little bit of anxiety, maybe to use the word fear itself may play a role, but I think we know that in this universe, there's good and evil. And I tend to look at the spiritual piece as drawing strength. And so if I focus on the gifts, the talent that I have and do my part, then I believe God's always going to do his part, and I'm going to be successful. So I'll say that that is also another foundational element. When you build a house, usually you start with a concrete slab, and there's going to be four corners, and you're going to have the strength of those pillars and columns to give you the firm foundation. And so the physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, those are the four that represent those corners that allow me a platform, a foundation to keep going. I'm also very fortunate, and probably from my mother, I've never seen a more positive person. Um, very charismatic, but at the end of the day, the glass is always full. It might be half full, it might be just a drop, but she's always focused on the positive, no matter how challenging the situation may be. And I've taken that on. And so if you talk about DNA, if you talk about family history and the tree and the roots and how things connected, I'm very grateful that I'm an optimist. I may look at the reality of life and I try to identify where the risks are and how we're going to mitigate that risk. I'm a morning person and I'm an active person. And I think when I see fear, I usually try to take a step back, assess the situation, and then really just be very thankful for my strengths, knowing what they are, trying to be very aware and identifying where the weaknesses or what those may be, and then surround myself with the resources, predominantly the people that can offset whatever my weaknesses are, and be a beacon of encouragement. Try to empower, amplify, lift up others, and if I sow the right seed, and there's a lot of grace and mercy that plays a role because none of us are perfect. I do strive for excellence and to be extraordinary. And I think those are just a few examples of what enables me to overcome fear.
And I love that you took it back to your roots, right? You took it back to your mother demonstrating for you what positive thought processes can bring, right? When you talk about the spiritual, physical, mental, I call that holistic wealth. And there's a guy, I can't remember his name, but he calls it harmonic wealth, where all the aspects of your life, it was physical, mental, spiritual, financial, and I call this word relational. I don't know if relational is really a word, but these are all the five components of our lives. And at any point in time, and you talk about trade-offs, right? At any point in time, one of them might be, something's going on in this one that might not be exactly how you want it to go. And then another thing may happen, and that's not necessarily how you want it to go. And what happens as humans, we tend to focus on the two that went down, right? And you talked about being grateful, instead of focusing on the three things that are still high. And what happens sometimes is that sometimes we allow these two things to drag the other ones down. And it's hard to have a fulfilling life and a peaceful life when everything is down. But I had this conversation with some friends this week, and it was like, the universe, God, spirit, source, whatever you want to call him, is like a parent. A parent, when you used to cry, they say, well, I'm keep on crying, I'm gonna give you something to cry for. But the flip side is it too. If you continue to be grateful, you will continue to be blessed with things to be grateful for. So when you demonstrate as a leader, the same way that your mother demonstrated for you, how you address things, that the glass half full, how you address things, that it's not a problem, but it's an opportunity in my mind to test my problem solving skills. When you demonstrate that for the people that are following you, whether it's in your personal life, your spiritual life, you are actually showing people, well, guess what? There's another way to do this without actually, cowering down to fear. So I thank you for being that leader, because we need more of that type of leadership.
Yeah, and if I may add to it now, yes, for the most part, it was focusing on the positive. Let me caveat, because there's two sides to a coin, and unless it's a fabricated coin where each side is the same, that's usually not the case. So there, growing up, we were very challenged. And we were taught, let's look at a grade scale, A, B, C, D, F. Anything over 90% is usually going to get you an A. And, thankfully, myself, my brother, two younger sisters, and even my children today, making the honor roll academically was enforced. And so it was, hey, did you give your best? If your best does not equate to an A, then what does it take to get you to an A? Whether that means there's required tutoring, required extra studying, and until you reach that, then that means you're not done. And so oftentimes while growing up, my friends, my peers may have been playing outside. Yes, we played outside, not the games, a video. At a certain age, hey, when those street lights come on, you make sure you're back home.
Yes.
And I'm going to know who your friends and their parents are.
Yes.
But needless to say, I grew up too where it was very much a practice and it was understood. You get boot to butt. And so if you were not doing what you were required to do, that could equate to different forms of punishment uh, because my parents were also disciplinarians. And even growing up through public school, the punishment system is a lot different than it is today. And I remember principals and vice principals could paddle you and
Yes.
parents had to give consent and so forth. And so you best believe I don't have any scars from my paddlings and spankings, but there was a purpose behind that. And so I said all that to say that yes, it was very positive, but fear can also be used in a not a negative way, but a positive way. And the spin on it is it goes back to, hey, what are your goals? Uh, you have a choice in life. You can pursue those goals, and sky's the limit. But it's going to take hard work, and that
Yes.
means if in life you're going to face challenges that will create fear, but you got to get back up. You will get knocked down at some point, whether it's someone that lets you down or the situation may not turn out the way you want it to, but you have to get back up. So I don't look at fear as something that is always negative. I do believe it is a matter of a principle and how we define what fear is and how we leverage whatever fear may be presenting itself. So I wanted to caveat with that and turn it back over to you and see if you had any other thoughts on fear.
So yeah, you read my grow up playbook. So all of that, the playing outside, the street lights, and yes, the disciplinarian, the parents. My father, I will say this, my father was military. And he could make me cry to the day he died just with his words. And they weren't harsh words, just calling my name in a certain way if I didn't do what I was supposed to do. My father never put his hands on me, but that's how much of a disciplinarian he was as far as how much I love and respected him. And it's not that I didn't love and respect my mom, but she was the paddler, so to speak. Um, and it worked because you train a child up in the way you want them to go, right? So I knew that there were certain things and actions and activities that if I did, I would get this response, and those were my goals were to avoid those. And then there are other things that I could do that would get this response, and those were the things I wanted. So that was the direction that I went in. So when you look at our lives, when you look at how we grow up, one of the things that I think that we all are fearful of is failure. And what I tell people is we look at failure like it's death, like, oh my gosh, it's failed and now the game is over. There's nothing else to do and it's done. And I tell people all the time, failure is a good thing because it's like an experiment. If you have an experiment in your science class, you have a hypothesis, you say, hey, I'm gonna take these steps and I'm gonna take it, and it works, and you say, okay, well, then I can take the next step. Or it didn't work. And you go, oh, wait a minute, it didn't work. Well, let me analyze what went wrong. What can I tweak? What can I fix to make it better? So I call it failing forward. You only fail if you fail and you stay there, or if you fall and you stay there. When you get up, brush yourself off and start moving forward, because every failure I have had, I have one up my game. Every failure, one up my game to get me where I am today. So talk a little bit about some of your failing forward lessons, not necessarily the thing that happened, but what did you gain from getting out of your comfort zone, taking those steps that you might have been a little apprehensive about, and what was waiting for you on the other side of that?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Let me say, I believe the conditions, the environment has to be one that creates the opportunity so that you can fail, where the the outcome doesn't cause uh, total.
Catastrophic.
Yeah, so it's not catastrophic. It's not a debauchery. It's not something where if you fail, it's a matter of life and death. So in my military role, people are our most precious assets, and so we train, we create repetitions. We have different scenarios, different conditions. You do something in the daytime, you also have to be able to do it with limited darkness. You do it when the sun is shining, you have to be able to do it when it's raining. You have to do it in the cold as well as in the hot. Because when we are looking at the enemy, you can't afford to fail because someone's life is at stake. So that's one way of seeing it in that capacity. If you're law enforcement and you're a first responder, the failing at that time to do the mission can really be a difference maker between life and death. But when you create a learning environment, or whether it's the business world, private sector, it could be local, state, I think we have to ask and see, and this is leader development that we're really getting into, organizational development, leadership. Do we create conditions so that we help the individuals under our organization structure grow? And so I agree. I think there's a time and place so that we can create those opportunities. And the biggest way to learn is sometimes when you fail. But you have to keep the scope realistic and set the conditions that allow for someone to do that. It can pick any particular task. Um, I, I I think if you are a chef and a cook, and I doubt very many first time chefs were able to cook a dish the first time without it either being overcooked or perhaps undercooked, and then serving that to someone who is there to give them a pass or fail based on their cooking. You probably wouldn't have the entrepreneur, first time cook, preparing that meal. You would give him or her plenty of opportunities so that they can get it just right. If you're on the assembly line and you have a certain amount of items, when I was in college, I worked with UPS, and so those packages come really fast when they're coming off the truck, coming down the chute, and you have to sort them. Today, they probably use machine learning or AI to help, and labels are on them. But when I was coming through in the 80s, you'd have an address that did not have a label barcode. You had to know the street address, the neighborhood, and you had to sort it manually. And for everyone that didn't get sorted correctly, that was not very efficient, nor was it effective if you'd look at one end, the new person who's really struggling to keep pace, and you would see the manager or the supervisor there to help out, where you could look to your right and see three or four others that were very much experienced, and it became where you snap your finger and things just move very well. So I think we have to create or look at the situation, the conditions, and know how to use failure to help us be successful.
Thank you for that. And I know we're wrapping up, but I do want to spend a little more time digging down into your brain because you're sharing so many good nuggets here. You've often said it's never really about you; it's about the people you serve. So, how do you keep that sense of purpose in front and center of your life and in your leadership?
Thanks. Again, it's amazing how much of this goes back to my roots and the resiliency piece, the spiritual piece. I think each person in our world has to determine and understand what their talent is, where their gifts may be. And for me, it is about making a difference in people's lives. Uh, Mother, school teacher, father serving in the military, father being very active in church and community. And it's the example of you do to help others. And in the process of understanding a purpose, in my case, the why. What's yours? What's every person why factor? Why do we exist? Why do we do the things that we do? And so whenever I say it's really not about me, it's not me focusing on myself as much as it is, am I using the resources that I have to contribute to help someone else be better? There's fulfillment in that. The older I get, I've been very fortunate and blessed to have a number of war conflicts that I've deployed to, and thank God I've returned home, and continue to invest in people, because this world is one that has a lot of challenges, but there's also a lot to be happy for and look forward to. And if I'm doing my part, how am I going to make it better? And not just be someone that's intaking all the time, but how do I pour in to my children, my grandchildren, other people in general? And it's about a life cycle. You start young, and by the time you work your way around and you get to that different stage phase of life, I do believe that it is more than just about me, but it's about how do I help others accomplish their goals. Those three questions that I asked: what are your goals professionally, personally, how you define success, and what are your options in life? And I think my vision, or any vision, should be something that you have. For me, it's what do you stand for? And then the mission is, what do you do? And so a mission typically will have the who, what, where, when, why, a clear task and purpose, what it is you're supposed to do and why you're supposed to do it to be successful at that mission. But a vision goes beyond that. That vision is almost though it's in the clouds. It's something that you're striving towards, that you never really get to it because you're always in pursuit of it. And I tell people I'm John Bevere is a spiritual leader, and he gave a study on, are you ordinary or are you extraordinary? And I forget, that's been, I don't know, 15 years or so. And I look back on that, and that really stuck out. And it actually has been part of my vision to be extraordinary people in any organization that you're a part of. And how do you lead people? How do you care for them? How do you train them? How do you maintain whatever resources that your organization needs to achieve success? And that's how I see it right now for Jackson. That's how I saw it before many moons ago. But hopefully that answers your question, or at least gives you a little bit of insight looking through my eyes, through my lens. I'll go back to you and see if you want to redirect or ask another question.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask a question around synergy. I think when I shared with you about our Synergy Leadership podcast, that is truly our mantra of synergy leadership. So from your perspective, if you had to explain synergy leadership in a simple term, how would you define it? And how can people, whether they're in business, community, family, apply it in their own lives?
Okay, that's a good question. One thing I did not do is actually look up and define synergy. I believe for me, when I look at synergy, it's about understanding whatever the topic is that we are addressing. It's collaboration, and it's being able to influence that particular body of effort, body of work, to go after whatever the objective, whatever the mission is, and whatever the vision is. And so synergy is about coming together and moving in a direction.
Well, for you to not have looked it up, I think you hit it right on the head. I'll share with you from my perspective, synergy is my ability to recognize the energy that I'm carrying. And we talked about it in multitudes of conversations with people that I've met, is that people don't recognize that they actually carry a certain energy at different times in their lives at different days. But what happens when you can recognize your energy and then recognize the energy in others and leverage, right, that energy around one common goal or mission? So for me, that's the synergy leadership, and having people, we do this thing called self-leadership. where people are taking onus for and responsibility for what they're bringing to the table, good, bad, or indifferent. Because most people don't look at themselves, they don't analyze themselves and say, well, what did I bring to this table or relationship or this team, and self-assess to make sure that they're bringing their highest and best self. So from my perspective, that is the pillar around really what all leaders are doing. If you think about it, you're an orchestrator, you're the maestro, you're the one that's kind of guiding the steps, but you have to have and be in tune with each one of the instruments that are being played. So as a leader, it is our responsibility, one, to check ourselves and to make sure that we know what that is, identify what the other resources are bringing, and then bring it all together to complete that mission. So I have to say, for someone who did not do the looking it up, you hit it right on the head.
Well, thank you. There are individual things that each person must look at for him or herself. You talked about awareness, self-awareness, self-assessment, as well as others. Could be peers assessing each other. It could be subordinates giving feedback, or it could even be whatever the hierarchy is in that organization, from a supervisor, a CEO, CFO, whatever that structure is, giving feedback back down. And so I think, here in the Army, we have numerous assessments that allow us to be self-aware as leaders. But no, you're absolutely right. Individually, how do you see yourself? How do you see others? And then collectively, how do you bring that together to synthesize and look at moving forward? So I'm glad I got it right.
Yes, you did. So as we close, I'll just ask you, is there anything that you would like to leave with our audience? What you had to give them some advice. What would be your closing statement to this audience?
Well, thank you. Those three questions, I think they're fundamental. I think there's something there. Every time there's a significant event in my life, in my wife's, my spouse, us as a couple, doesn't matter what it is. It could be making a decision about buying a house, or making a decision, or finding out it was time to move from the last location to this location, looking at kids. So I think those three questions have merit for everyone. But at the end of the day, life is short. And the sooner you can determine what your purpose is, what it is that gives you energy and excitement, then I don't think you're going to look at going to work as just a job. Serving in the military is not a job for me. It's a way of life. And I've been very fortunate and blessed to meet so many different people in different walks of life, to include yourself, by the way. And I think when one does that, they understand how to be fulfilled in life. And if you're missing that, then you probably need to continue to pursue and first identify, what is it that you're passionate about, and just know the clock's ticking. So on one hand, you're your biggest roadblock. If you haven't started, just get out there and take a couple steps. You'll be surprised how many people that have been on the journey that are willing to share their story, or maybe even call out a few things that can point you in the right direction. Try to be happy. Try to find enjoyment. And if you do that, I think you're gonna see that there's so much out there to be offered, both towards that person, and then you offering something to help others. I've enjoyed the opportunity to participate in your podcast. I look forward to seeing you at our next whatever activity that is, whether that's in the community, doing something for the community, or if it's just maybe grabbing a bite together for lunch. All of that's certainly well for me. So thanks again, Karen. I appreciate it.
And Daryl, thank you. And let me first say thank you for your service, not just for your service, but for the service members that you lead, and for all of our service members in the country and their families. That is a true sacrifice that you're making. I also want to thank you for opening up and sharing your story with us. What I love about our conversation today is how you shared your values and life lessons, and how it reminded us that leadership really is about the people, it's about the connection, and it's about the purpose. So Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. And I leave the door open that if we have an opportunity to share some more tidbits with our audience, I'd love to have you come back and join us. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Synergy Leadership Podcast. I hope you're walking away encouraged to lead with more purpose, to build stronger connections, and to create synergy in your own life and your work. Until next time, keep showing up with energy, lead with intention, and remember, you're responsible for the energy you bring into the room. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Synergy Leadership Podcast with Karen R. Jenkins. If you like what you heard today, please subscribe, rate, review, and share our show. See you next time.